Hello and welcome. My name is Vineet Malhotra and you're watching Deep Dive on NewsX. Prime Minister Modi has departed from New Delhi on a three-nation tour to Jordan, Ethiopia and Oman, countries with which India shares age-old civilizational links and bilateral ties. The Prime Minister's first stop is Jordan, where his visit coincides with the 75th anniversary of diplomatic relations between the two countries. Prime Minister Modi will be in Jordan from the 15th of December to 16th at the invitation of King Abdullah II. During the visit, both leaders will hold talks to review the full spectrum of India-Jordan relations and exchange views on regional developments. The Prime Minister is also scheduled to interact with the Indian diaspora in the country. From Jordan, the Prime Minister will travel to East Africa for the second leg of his tour. Prime Minister Modi will visit Ethiopia from the 16th of December to 17th, which is his first visit to the country. He is expected to hold detailed talks with Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed on all aspects of bilateral relations. The Prime Minister will also address a joint session of the Ethiopian Parliament. In the final leg of the tour, Prime Minister Modi will visit Oman from the 17th of December to the 18th at the invitation of Sultan Haitham bin Tariq. This will be his second visit to Oman and comes as both countries mark 70 years of diplomatic relations. The visit follows the Sultan of Oman's visit to India in December 2023. Both sides are expected to undertake a comprehensive review of cooperation in trade, investment, energy, defense technology and agriculture, while also exchanging views on regional and global issues of mutual interest. Now let us turn to the economic and trade dimension of this three-nation tour. Economic ties form a strong pillar of the India-Jordan partnership. India is Jordan's fourth largest trading partner, with bilateral trade valued at $2.875 billion in 23-24. India's exports to Jordan stood at $1.46 billion and include electrical machinery, cereals, chemicals, engineering goods and petroleum products. In return, India imports phosphates, fertilizers and phosphoric acid from Jordan. Indian investments in Jordan stand at around $1.5 billion, largely concentrated in the phosphates and textile sectors. Cooperation also extends to science and technology, supported through the Indian Technical and Economic Cooperation Programs. India's relations with Ethiopia have deep historical roots going back over 2,000 years, with trade links flourishing during the Exumite Empire in the 1st century AD. And according to the Department of Commerce, India's total trade with Ethiopia stood at $550 million during 24-25. India's exports were valued at $476 million, while imports stood at $73.38 million. India exports iron and steel products, drugs and pharmaceuticals, machinery, chemicals, paper, plastic and metal products to Ethiopia. India imports pulses, flax, yarn, precious and semi-precious stones, vegetables, leather and spices. India is Ethiopia's second largest trading partner. Trade and investment are also central to India-Oman relations. Bilateral trade in 2025 stood at $10 billion, including $4 billion in Indian exports. India was Oman's fourth largest source of non-oil imports and third largest market for non-oil exports. India's key imports from Oman include petroleum products and urea, with the hydrocarbons accounting for over 70% of total imports. Oman imports a wide range of goods from India, including refined petroleum products, iron and steel articles, machinery, electrical equipment, rice, textiles, pharmaceuticals, plastics, ceramics, ships and boats and precious metals, chemicals and food items such as tea, coffee, spices, fruits and vegetables. Trade diversification is expected to receive a boost with the India-Oman Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement approved by the Union Cabinet and expected to be signed during this visit. Jordan is home to a community of around 17,000 to 20,000 Indians, mostly engaged in low to mid-skilled employment, particularly in garment and textile factories, along with workers in construction, manufacturing, pharmaceuticals, IT and healthcare. Ethiopia has a smaller but highly skilled Indian community of around 1,500 to 2,500 people, including academics, entrepreneurs, engineers, managers and investors, with Indian professors teaching in Ethiopian universities and businesses contributing to local employment. Oman hosts the largest Indian diaspora among the three, with over 660,000 Indians, making it the largest expatriate community in the country. The majority work in the private sector in construction, oil and gas, logistics, retail and domestic services, with a smaller number in healthcare, engineering, IT and finance. Several major India linked projects are currently underway across these countries. In Jordan, the GIFCO fertilizer project remains a flagship joint venture valued at over $860 million. Jordan is also a key transit node in the proposed India-Middle East-Europe economic corridor. In Ethiopia, India has committed over $1 billion in line of credit for power transmission and sugar industry projects. Over 650 Indian companies operate in Ethiopia with cumulative investments exceeding $5 billion. In Oman, cooperation in green chemicals is underway through Sabachik Oman, which is first Indian-Omani investment in the industrial zone of Duqm. Several projects are also in the pipeline. For Jordan, these include advancing the India-Middle East-Europe economic corridor, water security and desalination projects, digital infrastructure and trade expansion targeting $5 billion by 2030. In Ethiopia, projects covering agriculture, mining, digital public infrastructure, renewable energy, education, health and defense are in the pipeline. In Oman, the formal signing of the India-Oman SEPA is expected, along with the new initiatives in logistics, port development, green energy, petrochemicals and discussions on an undersea gas pipeline. Finally, why are ties with West Asia so critical for India? Well, first, energy security, as the region supplies a majority of India's crude oil and LNG. Second, the India diaspora, which sends large remittances back home. Third, strong bilateral trade and economic partnership that India has with West Asia. Fourth, investments from Gulf sovereign funds into India. And fifth, maritime security and protection of sea lanes for global trade. Thus, this visit is being seen as a major push on India's Link West and Africa outreach strategy. We'll talk about this with Ambassador Veena Sikri, former diplomat. Ambassador Sikri, appreciate, ma'am, you taking out the time and speaking with us. Well, you know, Africa and the Gulf has always been a priority for the Prime Minister. Africa more so now, because India does not only want to have any kind of a transactional relationship with the continent of Africa. But if you remember G20 and how India went out of its way to include them in that forum, goes on to say that this is perhaps a natural cooperation which has been facilitated by a new streak of leadership.
Yeah, well, I think all the three countries that Prime Minister Modi is visiting have a very unique aspect each by themselves. It's difficult to club all of them together. With Jordan, for example, I think there's a formal prime ministerial visit taking place after more than 3 decades. So I think this revival of the direct bilateral relations between India and Jordan is very significant, because Jordan plays a crucial and very often understated role in the whole Middle East imbroglio. I think it's significant that Jordan has a peace treaty with Israel signed way back in 1994, but in Jordan you also have more than 50% of the people who are of Palestinian descent. So you can imagine there's a tremendous interest and in fact anxiety among the people of Jordan in what is happening in the Israel-Hamas war. And there's been even demonstrations when all this was going on, and calls for Jordan to break the peace treaty with Israel and so on. So Jordan's perspective on what is happening in the Middle East, the discussions with King Abdullah, are going to be very significant for our Prime Minister. The importance that India is giving to Jordan is very, very important, because their role is special in this region, and we have to really learn from them and understand from them how a peace can be found and how Jordan is managing this very tightrope walk between its relationship with Israel and Hamas and the rest of the Palestinian territory. Of course, they are in favor of a Palestinian state, but they certainly do not want any more refugees to come across from Palestine, from the West Bank and other areas into Jordan. So they're constantly worried about this aspect, and they're constantly looking at that. So they also are important because they have American bases there. So all in all, Jordan's position is so unique in this area that I'm very glad that our Prime Minister is going there to understand this and to develop the bilateral trade and defense and other relations. With Ethiopia, it's so special because we have really civilizational links with Ethiopia, which go back absolutely millennia. The trade routes, the monsoons connecting, leading the trade, the dates of the trade ships and all that. It's very, very special. In fact, many people don't know that there are close to 20,000 people of Ethiopian and East African descent living in India, mostly in Gujarat, and they are known as the Siddhis. Very dynamic group of people, very well integrated and very well known for having kept up their own culture and their own beautiful dances. In fact, I remember when I was DG ICCR, I used to send groups of the Siddhis to participate in festivals in other countries, and they always were so well received and so popular, and really a sign of India's well integrated society with people drawn from all parts of the world, whether it's the Jews, whether it's the Ethiopians and others. And in Ethiopia, there's always a great respect for India because of the influence that India has had on education in Ethiopia. Immediately after independence, Prime Minister Nehru and Emperor Haile Selassie of Ethiopia had a very good rapport, and India sends thousands of teachers from India, from different parts of India, to teach in schools and then later in colleges in Ethiopia. And today when you go, I was in Ethiopia some years ago when there was this India-Africa summit took place, and it's amazing how everybody in Ethiopia will tell you their influence, the influence that Indian teachers have had on their approach, on their understanding, on their psyche, and they really respect India a great deal for that. Today, a large number of these teachers have come back. We don't have too many teachers based there, but from Ethiopia, a very large number of students come to India to study under ITEC scholarships, ICCR scholarships, and they, are very keen to, in fact, increase their learning. I think the largest number of PhD students from Africa are from Ethiopia, and they've come to India, coming to India and studying in Indian institutions to get their PhD degrees. So in Ethiopia, their value for education, their value for further development is intense. And India had even at one time got a very good agricultural cooperation program, leasing of land in Ethiopia, that also is now being maybe developed or relooked at. So there's a lot of new ways and new ideas in which India and Ethiopia can develop their future cooperation, and that's why a prime minister's visit there at this time is really very important and most welcome. And I think if you look at Oman, I think that the importance of this trade agreement, the SEPTA, that's going to be very significant. As you said quite correctly, our Indian cabinet has cleared it, and now we are all hoping that it's actually signed, because Oman in many ways...
Ma'am, we have a paucity of time, but I do appreciate your perspective. I do appreciate your thoughts on that, ma'am. We've run out of time. Apologies for that. Thank you so much for joining us. We take a short break now. We'll be right back.